if you really want to get ahead, you need to invest in humans. Like there's only a few of us that really know how to do this with our hands. So you either need to find a partner that can do it, that is specialized in this thing, or you need to be able to spend way more money than you're comfortable on human beings that know this world better, because you will not get ahead. You won't be able to differentiate yourself if you are doing what everyone else is doing. That's just definitionally false.
Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where Miebach experts from around the world unpack real stories, strategies, insights, and innovations shaping the future of supply chain. I'm your host, Ellen Wood, joining you from my home office during this Snowpocalypse 2026. The era of D2C as an advantage is over. It's now table stakes. Customers expect fast, free, and seamless, and they expect it everywhere, every time. For retailers, that's putting a new strain on legacy networks that weren't designed for this kind of demand. Joining me for today's discussion are Julian Osorio, head of retail, fashion, and apparel distribution business unit here at Miebach, and Rob Hahn, the COO of Pattern. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Great to have you here today. So let's start with the basic one. Julian, in your view, what are the new D2C table stakes in 2026?
I believe the fast and free is not longer a differentiator in North America anymore. It is the minimum, right? I see what's separating leaders now and in 2026, just to answer your question, is going to be about reliability and transparency. So retailers and company needs to focus more on balancing inventory, margin, and incorporating risk management and flexibility in 2026 when they're planning about fulfillment and delivery times and promise to their clients.
It has gotten that complicated. Rob, what do you see?
Over the last few years, we've seen such an explosion of options for consumers, right? Which is one thing that is really quite different. And it has, obviously marketing implications, like front end. How do you meet those consumers where they are? And those actually are driven mostly by the capabilities on the supply chain side. And so as you get complexities of agentic commerce and you get marketplaces continuing to grow and new areas, I think one of the biggest things is how do you get flexibility and not get locked into any one solution for your supply chain, right? Like it's critical to make sure that you can meet that customer wherever they are. And that means if you need to use FBA, you got to use FBA and you got to be excellent at that. If it's FBT for someone on TikTok, you got to be able to crush that. If it's retail, then you got to be able to do that. And so having a flexible solution is just as important as a precise solution. And I think that is becoming more and more evident as some of that choice has exploded for consumers. And I think that becomes more in focus, even when you think about something like agentic or AI commerce. It is the complexity continues to increase in the supply chain, is not getting easier for brands to navigate, but it's the world we live in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that resiliency to shift quickly when a change happens is almost just the standard now. You have to be able to shift because it's going to change in the next moment. So what are some of these, or what have you seen in some of these top performing retailers? They're evolving their fulfillment strategies. They're in order to meet these customers where they are. And where are others falling short? Is it just not having that flexibility, or is there anything else that's driving that?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this for a lot more than we have here.
Oh, yeah.
But if we focus on, Amazon's the big one in the US. So let's take a look at what
Sure.
Amazon's actually doing. They've changed. It's all about placement is key. And within Amazon, what placement really is defined is, right, how much same day and next day delivery can we get, right? Because you see a conversion increase and ad effectiveness increase as you go from second day to one day to same day delivery. So how can you get there? Amazon's network has exploded so much over the past decade. I was there for 8 years. I saw that. I think I went there when there were 8 fulfillment centers, and now there's 250 plus. And so as that explodes, how do you make sure you get that selection close to the consumer? And so Amazon has changed a bunch. Look what they've done with they have a two-tiered inbound cross-dock network now, which increases complexity enormously, right? You're not sending to one place anymore. You're sending to potentially dozens of places, a minimum of 5, but potentially a lot more than that. And so that is all about placement, which is it's a good thing, right? It's better for brands, it's better for the consumer, and it's better for retailers, it's better for all three. But getting there is extraordinarily hard. So I think getting the fast and free, there's a scale of fast and free, right? Like if you're on your own Shopify site, for example, a consumer doesn't need quite as fast normally, right? They've already chosen you. You're solving a different problem. On a marketplace though, it's all about that speed. And so how do you balance it out? But I think that's what marketplaces are doing. For example, you're seeing this with TikTok making a major push into having speed and reliability. You're seeing Amazon continue to make it more complex, and they're not trying to make it harder. They're trying to solve the end problem, which is getting as close to end consumers as possible. And that complexity lands on brands. So I think really what the biggest strategy is, like, how it's an inventory management strategy. It's how do you have the best inventory pools? How do you reduce down speed? Here's what I'll end up saying. Forecasting is wrong every single time, literally every single time. So speed solves a lot of problems, right? Like if a combination of a forecast being wrong and a very slow supply chain, those things can't live together. Because a forecast is always wrong, speed matters more than ever today. It is super critical getting it into a marketplace, getting it to a consumer, refilling inventory pools close to consumers. That flexibility that's required has never been more complex. And I think the retailers that have one and that are going to win 2026 and beyond have that understanding. And they've, from the very beginning of the entire supply chain, are understanding that they need to change the way they think, both on the brand side and on the retailer side.
And Julian, what are you seeing from the network standpoint, as well as, trying to maneuver within those constraints?
Yeah, well, I can see the best fulfillment networks are blended, and a lot of those are really also focusing on the returns side of the business. So leading retailers right now are using dynamic fulfillment logic, deciding basically in real time where to ship, where to place their inventory, where do they have labor availability, where from which fulfillment center or distribution center they can fulfill in a more productive manner, so their end-to-end cost to serve is cheaper while satisfying the client's expectations on service, right? So I see best fulfillment networks being more dynamic now, with a different and more options and more opportunities to provide and match their services through zone skipping, regional carriers, crowdsourced delivery, ship to store pickup, fulfill from stores. Some different strategies that help, as I mentioned, balance their cost and being able to offer the right service to the right client for the right products, right? Also, networks that are able to absorb disruptions like weather events. We had that issue, right in the last week, and continue to be in North America, right? UPS is adjusting, FedEx is adjusting, all the companies are figuring out, are kicking off or dusting off their plans and their contingency plans across the network. So networks need to be able to absorb somehow that type of disruptions, as well as demand spikes, without breaking, and without breaking their pockets as well. I see some retailers falling behind because they're still focusing on what was mentioned before by Rob, is chasing Amazon, right? They continue to chase Amazon. They continue to offer blanket, next day delivery, and they're trying to squeeze in their D2C fulfillment and delivery process in the traditional legacy DC operations, using the same tools, using the same carriers, using the same technology. And for that reason, they're not able to properly understand their cost to serve and the implications of trying to squeeze in D2C in the regular wholesale retail networks. Those companies falling behind in that sense. They really need to see things in a different way, and they need to make sure they ship the product from the right places with the right capabilities, so they can understand their cost and service implications, and being able to ultimately provide a great service to their clients, or great experience to the clients.
I actually gave a talk at like a conference last year about specialization in specialization went, right? We went from like there was only retail, right? There's no e-commerce. And then it was like you got these really specialized e-commerce because you have these traditional 100-year-old retailers, right? That do the retail replenishment, they do the pallets and cases really well. E-commerce happened, it went to specialization, right? Where it was like you have e-commerce, and then you've got retailers, or I'm sorry, traditional like 3PLs. And then the traditional 3PLs were like, oh, we can do e-commerce, but they did it really poorly. And then the specialized D2C were like, oh, we can do B2B, and they do it poorly. And like, I think the reality is, I don't think we should lean away. I think actually the specialists win, right? Like, I don't do B2B at all. I do marketplace replenishment better than anyone in the world. I do great D2C fulfillment, for example. And like, I unapologetically don't do B2B. Like, find somebody that's been doing it for 100 years. They're going to do it great for you. Like that, store all your inventory there and think of me as a forward deployment of inventory. I think Julia hit the nail on the head. Specialization wins here. And it is something that we are like brands are struggling to get behind because it's so traditionally like the supply chain's the other way. But I actually think that it is where we are headed. 1000% is like, don't try to be the jack of all trades. Like, work with the best at that thing. Because the distance between the average D2C 3PL and the top, like we are way, way, way above the average. So there's still, it's not, logistics and fulfillment for e-commerce is not commoditized yet. We've got tons of time till that's true. Specialization wins.
Okay. So within that specialization, where do you see some of those centralized versus store-based models really, capturing that audience and being that special snowflake in that special situation, especially during peak commands? We just came out of the holidays. If they have a new product launch, where are they going to find that niche?
I think the reality is that it's an unpopular answer, but it depends, actually. Like, it really depends on what you're going to do. What I will say is no one needs to be in like 55 warehouses if you're not doing like an Amazon, right? Amazon is solving a different problem. Don't try to solve the Amazon problem. But like, if it's a new launch, for example, simply put, is thinking about it from a network perspective. If you are in a multi-node network, the higher the complexity and the higher the variability, the fewer number of buildings you should be in, right? You have to be able to trade that off because you are going to get your inventory in the wrong place. So if it's a launch, for example, like, don't put yourself in 10 buildings or 3 buildings or 5 buildings. It depends. Sometimes the answer is 3, sometimes it's 5. But like, most people don't know the answer to that ahead of time. So if you don't have information, the less information you have, the more consolidated you should be within your network. Like, that is a general truth, because otherwise you'll be like, oh, I think that New York will sell more. And then New York doesn't, you don't send enough, and you put stuff in LA, and then you're shipping across the country. It's both slower, your costs increase by 40%, and it's a bad consumer experience. So variability and flexibility have gone up as requirements. And that actually means that unless you're dealing with a marketplace, like, the number of buildings you're in might actually go down. Inventory pooling is more important than spreading out and being into spreading yourself out too much.
And Julian, you had mentioned returns management a little bit earlier. So where do you feel like that fits into this equation? And is it flexible? Does it tip the scale towards one model or the other?
So let me provide my 3 points on the previous answer about centralization or not. So very similar to Rob's point, centralized DCs win at scale, when to provide stability during peak seasons. They can handle volume surges, they can handle throughput by implementing automation, they can have multiple carriers and line haul strategies that you can use more efficiently through holidays or major launches, right? So I see centralized DCs playing very well on that space. A store-based fulfillment wins when you need speed and regional responsiveness, when your demand is not that stable, when you don't have huge volumes to be fulfilled, across your country. So last mile proximity, same day options, and absorbing some of the geographical demand spikes, right? You see, of course, in US, Canada, North America overall, some areas, they don't sell the same, winter jackets as much as the other areas because of weather differences. So optimizing the base store fulfillment operations in that sense can be also very good. And then the last point is about the orchestration. To Rob's point, it also depends on your strategy, your product, your presence, your geography. But it's more about having the proper tools and the proper data to make decisions so they can orchestrate and plan for how to manage the fulfillment operations rather than being a choice and being firefighting all the time. So those are my 3 points in regards to that. What is really the swing factor here is the returns, to my point before. So you can have some similar fulfillment strategies and similar fulfillment operations across US, but what really makes the big difference is the returns. I believe that store base and centralization after is the way to go. So the clients need to have the ability to go back to the stores and do simple returns at the stores. A store should have the capability to put that product back in their own inventories if possible. And if not, they need to go to a centralized DC where the overall network and distribution can deal with those volumes. But it doesn't make sense for companies to, return products to multiple DCs, leave those products there. They're going to be hanging around for months and years, and then they go through liquidation, and then there is a lot of inventory carrying costs in that sense, and they're not able to run to turn the product properly. So a store-based return approach is very, very important and is been playing a great effect to retailers in US in the last 5 years.
All right. So we've talked a lot about, how this model should be designed and executed. But it's in that execution where we're actually talking about the automation and making sure that it's even possible. So it's not about robotics for robotics' sake. I know we get into a lot of discussions about the automated fulfillment solutions, and people are like modernize. You have to be able to automate this process because labor is expensive. Labor is mercurial. It's going to change. If we have this automated, it's so much easier. But it's a tool. It's not just robotics to spend millions of dollars on an automated solution. And so as the retailers are grappling with cost, speed, the complexity that you guys are bringing to this conversation, it's not just a tool to do things faster. It's a strategic decision in order to, implement any of these types of things. As you pointed out, both of you, the Amazon model isn't something that retailers should be aspiring to, and it's not feasible for most of them. Bottom line, they just can't do it. So what types of automation are actually helpful for delivering some of this impact and flexibility that the two of you are commenting on, and how much of it is hype or help?
I hate to respond with the typical consultant answer, which is it depends. And I know Rob already said it before me, which is great. So basically, how I define, the best automation or what kind of automation to our clients is the best is I define it as automation works when it's boring, when it's phased, and when it's tied to the network, and when it's not a hype, right? So people believe, and throughout the last, many years, last 10 years, people believe that they can compete if they get to the Amazon level of automation. And the truth is that most North American retailers, mid-sized retailers, they can get a lot more value from targeted automation. And that's where my advice always comes to our clients. Let's focus on what can be more impactful to you, that is modular and that can scale up in the future. Goods to person systems, automated sortation, depending on the operations, right? Smart put walls, or better systems orchestrations like warehouse management systems and WESs and WCAs, right? There is numbers out there that show that automation in fulfillment models work when they're focused on alleviating pain points for the organization in their end-to-end fulfillment process and being able to tackle the variability of the operations, whether it is demand, whether whatever is creating spikes in their operations is what they need to tackle. So let's not focus on the flashy automation. Let's focus on adapting and understanding where the automation needs to be or adds the most of the value, and being able to scale up from that.
And Rob, being from Amazon, I'm sure you have some very strong opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I've spent a ton of my career, right? So like I was in robotics at Amazon, and I've spent a lot of time focusing on like, how do you remove decision points? How do you remove touches? Like, and that's actually the problem you're trying to solve. It's not how do I implement robotics? That sometimes is the right answer. And for Amazon, actually, I mean, one of the things when people talk about like robots at Amazon, the problem that Amazon was solving with robotics was actually like density. They were trying to get more inventory into the buildings because it was a speed problem. So they were trying to get it closer to consumers. And so therefore, if you look at like Kiva Robotics, like what is it, 2012, we had acquired Kiva Robotics, which became Amazon Robotics, right? I launched one of the first robotic fulfillment centers. It was like super cool, incredibly hard, really interesting problem to solve, but it was actually not as much about replacing. Like it actually happened, it was about storage. It's like, how do you get more into the same building? And that allows transportation cost savings and also faster delivery. So like, it wasn't like the problem that they were solving was not fancy. To Julian's point, it wasn't cute. It wasn't interesting. It was impactful. And so for us, like in my entire career, there's a phrase that I use in my teams all the time. Like, we do not give ourselves permission to do interesting things. We only do impactful things. And those impactful things sometimes are interesting, which is fun. We get to build some really interesting stuff, but it has to be impactful. I think there's three things, like, and some of it is quite boring. To Julian's point, you have processes, you've got automation, you've got robotics. They're three separate things, right? So processes could be like, I need to move this table from here to over there, and I will remove a touch. Because the point is, removing touches increases your quality, increases your speed, decreases your cost. So remember the problem you're solving and solve that problem, right? So process is actually quite powerful. That requires expertise, that requires understanding of your processes. And like that actually is, if you can build processes that are repeatable and scalable, then you can automate those processes. You can't jump straight to automation or robotics and assume that it's going to solve the foundational problem. Figure out what process you need to have and to eliminate actual problems throughout and touches, for example. Like if you stop touching stuff, your speed will improve, your quality will improve, and your cost will go down. Just stop touching stuff. So focus on your processes, and then you figure out if the right solution is automation. And I define robotic versus automation as robotic being something that requires more variability and automation being something that's more repeatable. Like you don't need a robotic solution for a sorter, for example. Like it's well defined. We've got dozens of different sorter types out there, for example, that can use this. So I think for everyone to figure out where am I on that scale from just like move the table through I really need a very high intensity robotic solution. Most people are not anywhere close to that other end of the spectrum. The vast majority of people out in the world need to focus on processes, and software can do the vast majority of what most brands need versus hardware. And that's a person who spent tens and hundreds of millions of dollars on hardware in my career, but like you need a lot more scale than you think you need before you need to spend tens of millions of dollars on hardware. You can do a lot with good humans, good processes, and good software.
All right. Well, and that's one thing that we've always said at Miebach is if you have to address the process first, because if you automate a bad process, you're just going to be doing the bad process faster. It's not going to actually solve the problem. And so I guess, we've talked a little bit here in the past few minutes about, making sure that those processes are right to begin with and identifying that initial problem that you're trying to solve with whatever automation or robotics or software. So how should a mid-sized retailer, not the Amazons, they've got their flagship the 5-star program, but the smaller ones, the smaller retailers, how do they stay competitive and keep up with the rest of the market that is solving these problems very quickly with automated solutions? Is it just a matter of, having that deep core understanding of your business and your intentions and your goals? Or is there something else that they can be looking externally and saying, yes, we do this the same. Let's copy this proven process?
I believe Rob already touched a little bit into that point before. He stole a bit of my thunder there. So the right place to start is of course is not copying Amazon, right? Is getting very clear on what is the problem they're trying to solve and understanding the cost to serve. Those are the two main areas that I always focus on. What is it that you're trying to fix? And understanding very clearly how much is costing you to serve your clients, right? Is beginning to understand where labor, service failures, return processes, touches, and inventory fragmentation are within their network, right? I've seen companies, or I wouldn't recommend companies to jump to automation right away without being able to fix or understand or fix their current problems that don't probably need automation to, or in some cases they do. For example, basic things like inventory allocation, right? Inventory allocation strategies, slotting, right? Understanding their proper segregation of their products, clients, and their inventory. How do they manage their order logic, right? Those are foundational matters that with minimal investment, they can gain some efficiencies. So I'll start from there, understanding and fixing the foundational and the basics, then moving into targeted automation. Once they understand the problem, once they understand their cost, they know their main pain points, they know what part of the network and the process is costing the most. So now let's focus on finding the right automation to solve for that specific problem, right? And the third point is once you go through the foundational, you go through targeted automation to fix the problems you already know, then move into design for flexibility and scalability. Those will be my 3 points to highlight for mid-sized retailers when looking into implementation of automation in the future.
Okay, I've got two things that I'll say on this one. One is a very practical, it's a tactical one. I came into Pattern 3.5 years ago, and we've built all of our own software, and I'll come back to that in a second. So we've designed our own hardware. We have built all of our own software. And one of the major reasons that is because, Ellen, you asked a question. You said two things, and I think they're important to differentiate. One was, how do I get ahead? In the same sentence, you said, how do I get ahead and how do I keep up? And the reality, those are two really different things.
You're right.
If you want to keep up, then use the software that's out there and the processes that are out there, right? There's only so many good WMSs out in the world, and they're only solving so many problems. And so if you actually want to keep up, use the best of those, pay for them, make it work. If you want to get ahead, then you need to really break the thinking. And so this is my more practical one, is like, I use flow-based systems like exclusively, right? So if you go into these old warehouses, they're batchy based, right? So they come in, they have to be stowed, for example, put into the racks, taken back out and processed. That is where old softwares work. You need to remove touches. You need to increase your speed. And so I would encourage all these people to understand, how do you implement and how can you think about flow-based systems, better decision points earlier in the processes? That is how you can set up. You can't execute fungible inventory if you don't have flow-based systems which can dynamically do what you need to do. Otherwise, you're going to be touching stuff a ton. It's going to be too slow and you're not going to be able to do it. So if you want to keep up with everybody else, then make sure you choose the right WMS. Make sure you are as efficient as possible. You need great operators. If you really want to get ahead, you need to invest in humans. Like, there's only a few of us that really know how to do this with our hands. So you either need to find a partner that can do it, that is specialized in this thing, or you need to be able to spend way more money than you're comfortable on human beings that know this world better. Because you will not get ahead. You won't be able to differentiate yourself if you are doing what everyone else is doing. That's just definitionally false. So how do you get to something that is more dynamic, more flexible? You got to break the mold a bit.
All right. So, coming into our final discussion point, what is the one fulfillment myth that you think retail leaders need to let go of before they get really into 2026? And what's a truth you think they should build into their strategy instead?
Yeah, it's fun because I mean, I'm not a consultant, I'm an operator, right? So I get to talk with tons of brands, very much on like if you would like services side. And it's an interesting thing to watch how brands optimize for things that I think are generally not the right thing. And I think a lot of people are concerned about they focus on one piece. So for example, marketplaces, for example, you're like, oh, I want to reduce down how many different places I'm shipping to, because that will reduce down transportation costs. But now I'm doing larger batches. And now what they don't think about is I'm spending more in inventory because it takes longer to get in because I'm doing LTL instead of full truckload. And now I have, not only does it take longer, so I'm tying up more cash, but then I'm pushing more into Amazon. If my lead time increases, so I'm spending more on storage fees. And it's a different bucket. So like the point, like you really need to think about this as a total cost problem, and brands struggle with that problem. So I come back to something I kind of opened up with, and like speed is more critical than precision, more than ever. Like then that's true to the end consumer, but that is also true into marketplaces. Some brands that are really, really big on Amazon, for example, or Walmart or TikTok, getting that piece is more critical than ever. So it is fun to be able to have these conversations with brands all the time like this. We have we put on our own conference here in Salt Lake City. It's May 20th, 21st this year. It's called Accelerate. Actually, I think we've got a discount code, supply chain 30. It's a 30% off. Come to Accelerate. This is what we talk about. We talk about these kind of problems all the time with supply chain people, marketing people. If you are on marketplaces, if you're doing e-commerce, this is what we end up talking about. But the thing that I would end up saying here is, at the end of the day, is speed is more critical than ever. I'll say it like a 15th time. It is something that you cannot sleep on. It is really what will define the way that we move forward as a retail group. Like it is going to be more and more important, which means you need to have supply chain capabilities that can keep up. Otherwise, you will get left in the dust.
Absolutely. All right, Julian, what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna have to go a little bit against Rob's point there. Yes, speed is great. I think the myth is that retailers need to let go of that concept that faster fulfillment is always or equal better fulfillment, right? So for many years, as you mentioned in multiple times, the industry has been chasing next day, same day, 2 hours delivery, without really understanding their cost, the complexity, the operational risk to do so, right? In North America, the mindset is, that specific mindset has overextended the networks. It's been increasing the parcel cost. There is labor strain, there is a lot of impact on peak performance because the companies are only, or they've been looking only about speed and how to gain that speed without understanding the fulfillment strategy and how the network end to end and the distribution is aligned to that strategy. And usually they're on opposite sides. So that's why my first point is not that speed is not important. Speed needs to be considered, but it doesn't mean it's better. And when we talk about, better fulfillment that is looking after end-to-end client experience or customer experience, the winning fulfillment strategies nowadays or in the future will be those they can balance trade-offs and intentional segmentation. What I mean by that is not every customer wants the same things at the same speed, right? So the main point is that we need to design networks that can differentiate between service levels by customer, by product, by geography, and being able to implement that through aligning inventory, automation, and last mile choices accordingly, right? As I mentioned before, you can use UPS, FedEx, crowdsource deliveries and other methods to deliver. On top of that, they need to use data to be able to orchestrate and balance service, profitability, and resilience in real time. And then last point here is the retailers or companies that will win in the futures are those that are being able to flex without breaking, right? That they can implement the proper automation, that they can embrace optionality, that they can implement potentially multiple fulfillment models within the same network to accommodate to their strategy and customer demand, that can handle the spikes of volumes and labor volatility and carrier disruption, right? So it's not only about speed. There's more about speed and in order to make fulfillment networks better and protecting client experience.
Really quick, Julian, I think it's worth a clarification. I actually don't think we're on opposite sides of this. I did not clarify very well, but I think it's worth actually mentioning, right? There's first mile, there's middle mile, and there's final mile. On the final mile, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, we are exactly on the same side. Like, don't compete with Amazon, meet your customer where they are, understand what speed is required. I do think the middle mile is where speed matters the most. And that's where most of my focus was. And I didn't articulate that very well. But the middle mile, because the complexity of the number of places, the number of inventory pools, and the number of destinations that our supply chains need to be able to support, the middle mile speed, because the forecasts are going to be more dynamic than ever, the speed in the middle mile is more critical than ever. The final mile, you and I, we do not disagree in any way. Everything you said, I agree with 100%. But middle mile, which I think is less sexy than the final mile, but I think just as important, if not more important, in a world where we have inventory in so many places and such a decentralized consumer experience, that is where the differentiation actually lands. And it's less visible, less sexy, but it's just as interesting if you actually break it down. So I think we're actually aligned on the final mile, just to
That's good.
make me feel better, if nothing else. We're on the same page.
That's good.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today to talk about this topic. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Speaking of Supply Chain. That discount code that Rob mentioned will be available in the description if you want to check out that user conference in Salt Lake City. It is Salt Lake City, correct?
It is, yep.
Okay, good. I got it right. All the snow is here, so I don't know what's going to be happening in May in Utah. It's not going to be snow. Sorry, we took it all.
Yeah, you stole it. There's some snow in the mountains still. It's quite beautiful, but hopefully not actively snowing a bunch in the city. We should be good by then.
Exactly. All right. So thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Speaking of Supply Chain. If this conversation sparked a new idea or touched on a challenge that you're navigating, we'd love to hear from you. There are links in the episode description for you to join the conversation online. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on hearing how global design meets execution.